Week 14 checking in on the Thursday nighter. We got Packers-Lions to kick it off. Who's leading the MVP race? And what about that playoff picture now into 14 weeks of the NFL season coming at you right now?
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look at the NFL on the field and in the front office with elite breakdowns to next-level analysis and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Thanks everybody for making us your first listen here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Love our everydayers and appreciate all the new listeners joining us daily here at Peacock and Williamson. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube or wherever you are listening to this podcast so you don't miss an episode as we roll through the rest of the season. And hey, we're sticking with you daily throughout the off season as well. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson brought to you by FanDuel. Big return right now on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, a little differently this week for us. There's a lot of teams on bye. We're not going to do our 6-pack that we usually do. We're going to do a 1-pack. We're just going to feature that Packers and Lions game Thursday night here at the end of today's show because it is such a phenomenal game and has a lot of implications and should be just a whole lot of good football on a Thursday. And both teams played last Thursday, so it's not short rest for this division matchup with the Packers and the Lions. So it should be a really good one. We'll make our picks for that game in a little bit. I want to talk about the MVP race first, though. And we get asked about this a lot, and feel free to continue to get those questions in for tomorrow's mailbag episode of Peacock and Williamson. MVP. Who is your MVP right now, Matt, and why is it Josh Allen?
So let me just throw some names out, without picking who I would take. Pat Mahomes is the best football player we've ever seen, and his team's only lost one game, and he doesn't have as much around him as usual, but he's also not having the best season amongst quarterbacks either. But if they go 16-1, you at least have to consider the guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Jared Goff's a quarterback and having a very good year of what most think is the best team in the league and the best offense in the league. I think he has a case. Lamar Jackson seemed like the leader in the clubhouse a month ago, and he's the reigning MVP. Not that that matters, but he's having, I think, a better year this year than last. Mike Sando does a chart basically saying how much help do quarterbacks get from special teams and defense. And he calls it the quarterback betrayal index. How much does your team betray you? Like, I remember when he would do it like in the Phillip Rivers, Ben Roethlisberger, Brady era. Brady always got great support. Rivers was being betrayed by his team more than any of those stud quarterbacks, just to put it in an example. And Lamar is at the top of the list of not getting help. In terms of the defensive special teams hurting his cause. So that's a case. Derrick Henry on the same team, I think also has had a remarkable season, as has Saquon Barkley. If we're going to drift away from quarterbacks, I think there's only two to consider. I prefer Barkley to Henry, especially in the recent, recent weeks here as well. He has no chance to win it. But I think the player that's playing most like an MVP is Joe Burrow, just in terms of just watching the tape and level of play. But you talk about being betrayed by your team. Yeah. Holy cow.
Root for Joe Burrow as well.
Right. But it's not his fault. And then there's Allen, who I think would get my vote. I don't think he's a runaway winner. But I don't know that his supporting cast is quite as good as it's been. Many people, including myself, thought the Bills would be good, not great this year, that this would be the step back, get your books in order, eat your vegetables, trade Stephon Diggs. And they're better than ever. And he's got a 20-5 touchdown to interception ratio. I'm seeing fewer bad plays and turnover-worthy plays. As usual, he has 6 rushing touchdowns, so he has accounted for 26 touchdowns. He's a touchdown machine. So I think he's my vote, but I think those are the only names unless I'm missing somebody.
Joe Burrow, 30 touchdowns to 5 interceptions on the
remarkable.
season, leads the league in passing yards. He has to do it all for that team. And if they don't score 40 points, they don't win football games, is what's going on with the Cincinnati Bengals. I don't think he's going to win it, but I think he is playing phenomenal and should get some consideration, because when you're a sub 500 team, you're just not going to win MVP.
No.
The way it goes. So he kind of goes in a separate category, but he's playing phenomenal right now. Lamar Jackson, as you mentioned, and even if you consider Josh Allen's rushing touchdowns, puts him at 26, he'd still be behind both Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson for passing touchdowns, and not even counting their rushing touchdowns. So those guys for sure have a claim. For me, though, I'm with you. Josh Allen would get my vote right now. And maybe the counting stats aren't quite there, but he's been efficient. He's been awesome. And Saquon Barkley, if you look at I'm looking at the FanDuel odds right now, and Saquon Barkley is second. Number one would be Josh Allen. And he's the betting favorite right now to be MVP. Second, Saquon Barkley. Third, Lamar Jackson. Then it's Mahomes, Goff, and then a huge gap. And then it's like Jordan Love and Jalen Hurts and a whole bunch of other players, Derrick Henry, and basically every other quarterback in the league after that. And my vote would go to Allen. I think he is the leader in the clubhouse now. He's taken that over from Lamar Jackson, who was leading it. And the biggest consideration right now is, okay, can you give the MVP to a running back? Because it's become a quarterback award. And I'm not against giving the award to who the most valuable player is in the NFL. But you ask yourself this, okay, most valuable player. If you take Josh Allen away from the Bills and you take Saquon Barkley away from the Eagles, what are you left with?
Right.
Slam dunk. No chance I give that award to Saquon Barkley. I'm giving it to Josh Allen.
Yeah, I mean, the award, valuable, Barkley's not even in the top 10. Neither is Henry. I mean, it's just Penei Sewell is more valuable than Barkley. I know we're going to have a wide receiver conversation, but so I heard Robert Mays or somebody on his show suggest this, and I think the league should do something like what college does. Like, I'm cool giving out an MVP or a Heisman. You know what I mean? Best player in the league. Give out the Heisman. Great. Give out offensive player of the year. Give out defensive player of the year. But I think what they should do, like college, is give out a Bolitnikoff. Call it the Jerry Rice Award or the Lance Allworth Award or whatever. Who's the best tight end in the league? Who's the best pass rusher in the league? The Bronco Nagurski Award, the Dick Butkus Award, do it for every position. I think that would be cool. The award show would be even more fun.
The Outland Trophy. Can we give the offensive lineman some more love in the NFL awards season, right? And I'm with you on that. That's kind of what offensive player of the year has become. So there's a defensive player of the year. That's defensive MVP. And by the way, the only name that's on the defensive side of the ball, TJ Watt, is 25th on the list of MVP odds here at FanDuel. He's at 500 to 1, so just some whatever absurd number that, because he's not going to get it. But you have a defensive MVP, that's defensive player of the year. You have MVP, which is pretty much a quarterback award, and they are the most valuable. So whoever the most valuable quarterback is the most valuable player in the league. And then offensive player of the year becomes who's the best wide receiver or running back in the
basically who's the best fantasy player that year.
Yeah, exactly. Go to Saquon Barkley, in my opinion, very easy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Of the year. So that's where we're at. Do you want to weigh in? We didn't really plan to do this. Do you want to weigh in on defensive player of the year? Is it TJ Watt?
His stats haven't been as great as you would think. And I mean, I'm going to lose my black and gold, membership card here, but I think Cam Hayward's been better than him this year.
Oh, okay. Well, no,
I think Hayward's been unbelievable. And I'm not even saying he should be defensive player of the year. Watt gets doubled and tripled at a remarkable rate, and he still makes a ton of plays. I don't think Garrett deserves it this year. Chris Jones has been good. It's a little bit of a down year. I mean,
what's crazy is, I was going to say Hendrickson. We just badmouthed everybody on the defense for the Bengals and not helping out Joe Burrow, but they do have the NFL sack leader right now in Trey Hendrickson with 11.5 sacks.
And it's pretty remarkable. And I just did so much Bengals homework, of course, because Steelers Bengals. But I'm not detracting what Hendrickson did. Our keys to the game. Don't let Hendrickson beat you. Triple him because there's nobody else. Of course, every team in the league takes that approach, and he still has 11.5 sacks. It's just really, 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 really impressive. But if you go back and look where he got his sacks, he gets them in bunches against terrible teams. I think he had like 4 against the Raiders. Like, that's coaching malpractice not to help your left tackle after sack 2 or 3. I mean, I think he got 2 or 3 against the Browns when they had a third string tackle. So I don't know that down in, down out, he's been as impactful as Garrett or certainly Watt or, so I think Watt's probably the lead. I mean, I bet the odds have Watt as the leader in the clubhouse. And I get that. I got no qualms with that. He's also the best I've ever seen at forcing fumbles since Peanut Tillman.
I mean, he's phenomenal. And, Watt or Myles Garrett are going to be in the conversation always. Bosa and Micah Parsons have been kind of banged up this year, so they're not really in it. But it's tight. I think Defensive Player of the Year could go any direction. I would have given it to Fred Warner after 4 weeks. I'd have probably given it to Dexter Lawrence after 8 weeks.
Great name.
Yeah. And
Hutchinson.
Hutchinson early in the season. He's still got 7.5 sacks. He only played 5 games.
He's like 5th on the list or something still. He hasn't played since 2 months.
And so you look at the sack leaders, Myles Garrett might get it because he is the biggest name on the top of the sacks list. He's got 10. He's 4th in the league. Above him is Donnell Hunter. Nick Benito is 2. And Trey Hendrickson is 1 as far as sacks go. Will Anderson could start to get into the conversation if the Texans defense, I think he's probably not going to get it. But the Defensive Player of the Year is going to be hard this year.
If you could bet who's going to lead the league in sacks when it's all said and done, I would probably take Garrett. I think he passes Hendrickson in this next month plus,
And, defensive backs don't really get it anymore.
No.
Give it, the Jets haven't been good. You're not going to give it to a Sauce. Maybe a Patrick Surtain could get in the conversation. Or,
Surtain's not a bad one. Not a bad one. That's not
interceptions, and we got to move on here. But Xavier McKinney's been a phenomenal addition to the Packers. He's got 7 interceptions this year. He's not going to win the award or anything like that, but it just reminded me because we're going to talk about the Packers a little bit here, and I want to have a note on their wide receivers as well, which is going to be a big part of this podcast. So we'll talk Packers, we'll talk Lions.
One thing I want to chime in is Pro Football Focus is great. Some things I could take or leave them, but they put out their 3/4 of the season Pro Bowl team today. And as you said, it's almost always a D-line award. The 2 edge players were Watt and Garrett. The 2 inside guys were Chris Jones and Cam Hayward. I don't think either one of the D tackles really has a chance at the award, though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You might go to, a defense that Budda Baker could be up there, right? Because he's like the star on an unnamed defense. Maybe if the Carolina or if the Arizona Cardinals go on and make the playoffs. I don't know if there's any linebackers that are just blowing me away. Roquan Smith, could always be a consideration. We used to talk about how bad their defense is, and so it's kind of like the Bengals thing. It's gonna be a tough one. Let us know who's your defense.
I bet it comes down to Watt versus Garrett when it's all
it probably does in the end.
Which are the last 2 winners.
At BD Peacock, at Williamson NFL, YouTube comments. Let us know who's your defensive player of the year in the NFL, because I think that's a lot more difficult than MVP and offensive player of the year so far through 13 weeks of the season. Week 14 nearly upon us. Thursday nighter, Packers at Lions, going to be a great one. And wide receiver salaries, have we jumped the shark there with how much the league is paying wide receivers, with how many good ones are coming into the league every year? Next. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is sponsored by Mint Mobile. And with big wireless providers, what you see is never what you get. Somewhere between the store, your first month's bill, the price you thought you were paying magically skyrockets. With Mint Mobile, you'll never have to worry about gotchas ever again. When Mint Mobile says $15 a month, when you purchase a 3-month plan, they mean it. So say bye-bye to overpriced wireless plans, jaw-dropping monthly bills, and unexpected overages. Ditch overpriced wireless with Mint Mobile's deal and get 3 months of premium wireless service for $15 a month. To get the new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/LockedOnNFL. That's mintmobile.com/LockedOnNFL. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/LockedOnNFL. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to that $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabyte on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. This episode is also brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money action on sports daily fantasy made easy. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made it accessible to play DFS for everyone. And all you do is you pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. So run your game all season long on Prize Picks. And Prize Picks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy. So if your lineup player leaves early and in the first half, and even if your players get hurt and does not return in the second half, Prize Picks keeps your lineup alive. So just go to prizepicks.com or download the app and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That is code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup at Prize Picks. Run your game. Okay. Real quick peek at the playoff picture. We've talked MVP before I get to the topic about wide receiver salaries, which I think is super fascinating in the NFL. And then we'll make our picks for the Thursday nighter here, and we'll come back and make all the rest of our picks for the rest of the week on Friday's show and break down that Thursday night football game between the Packers and the Lions. Looking at the playoff format and the playoff teams that are competing right now. Do we already know the playoff teams except for 2 races in the NFC for the South and the West divisions? I feel like we know 12.
I think the AFC, I think we know.
Yeah.
I mean, the AFC, I think that I'd be shocked if the 7 that are in right now don't end up the 7. You know, maybe Denver is the 6th seed, not the 7th seed or something like that. But I think we know the teams. That seems crazy to say that in early December.
We got a big one with the Chargers and the Chiefs coming up this week. But, I mean, the Chargers aren't going to catch the Chiefs, right? The Broncos on Monday Night Football just, kind of solidified their spot even at the 7th seed. There's 2 games that separate 7 and 8. And you look at the 8th seed in the AFC, which would be the Indianapolis Colts. They're 6 and 7. They're under 500 right now. The Dolphins are 5 and 7. The Bengals are 4 and 8. They're cooked. There's only a couple teams that you could even conceivably think might even get in, and that would take a complete collapse from the Broncos or the Ravens or the Chargers or the Steelers or someone like that. So I think we know the 7, and now it's just like, okay, is it the Ravens or the Steelers that are the 3 and the 5 or 6? Is it the Chargers and the Broncos that are the 5, 6, 7 in the wild card? And that's really the only question left here.
Yeah, I mean the Ravens could still win the North. If the Steelers lose this week, they're only a half game behind, and they play again. And the Steelers have a really tough schedule. But still, I mean, the difference between being the 3 seed and the 5 seed. Going to Houston doesn't sound terrible as a 5 seed, and being the 3 seed hosting the Chargers or Denver doesn't sound all that terrible either. Just real quick, I know the Colts have a game at least on Miami, but if one of those 2 teams was to catch fire and finish undefeated the rest of the way, I think it's more likely to be Miami than Indy.
Yeah, and the Colts have a bye week, so it's a half a game. So
okay, yeah, I wasn't sure on that.
If the Dolphins win this week, then they'll be tied at 6 and 7.
They have the Jets at home this week, so maybe Miami gets to 10 and 7, but that seems unlikely.
And a team like Miami, they have to win 2 more games just to get to 500.
Right. I mean, they're still looking up at 500.
And you have 3 left to play after that. And these other teams are already 2 games under 500. It would take a complete collapse and a team like Miami winning out, basically, for any of this to change. Buffalo Bills already clinched the division. Kansas City Chiefs have clinched a playoff spot. We've got 4 teams that have been mathematically eliminated from the playoffs, even though there's some others that are coming very soon. The Pats, the Jags, the Raiders in the AFC, and the Giants in the NFC, all mathematically eliminated right now. So those are the things we know for sure that are going to be happening. And then you look at the NFC side of things. It gets real interesting this week with Lions and Packers because not only the North, and look, the Packers, even if they win, can't leapfrog the Lions, but they open the door for the Eagles to potentially get the 1 seed after this week if the Packers beat the Lions. So 1 seed still in question. There's still a lot of jockeying position in the North between the 10-2 Vikings and the 9-3 Packers, which would be 5-6 right now in the NFC playoff picture. There's a few more teams that are close at 6-6 in the Bucks, the Cards, the Rams, and then you got the Niners and the Cowboys are just, treading water at 5-7 right now. that'll quickly be out of it with another loss and definitely with 2 more losses. And so to me, it's the Falcons or the Bucks. And then it's like the Cards or the Seahawks, maybe the Rams that win the West, and the Seahawks have a 1-game lead, and the Falcons and the Bucks are tied. So that's the 3 and 7 seeds, or that's the 3 and 4 seeds in the West and the South. And can anybody possibly catch Green Bay, Minnesota, Washington? I don't see it.
Yeah, I don't either. I mean, I don't think it's a very weak limb to go out on to say the 3 teams are going from the North. I mean, I think that's a foregone conclusion at this point. The order, I guess, we can still be determined. Huge win for Washington this past week to kind of get back in the, kill the losing streak. So I think they're the wild card team, but aren't going to catch Philly. I think Tampa is a better team than Atlanta, but the fact that Atlanta won head-to-head goes a really long way. And I'm looking at both their schedules. They're both really easy. I mean, Tampa hosts Vegas, goes to the Chargers, goes to Dallas, and then Carolina and New Orleans at home. I mean, Tampa could, win out. Atlanta probably loses in Minnesota. Then they go to Vegas, but then they host the Giants. They go to Washington and then Carolina. So at Minnesota, at Washington could derail Atlanta. And obviously head-to-head would go to Atlanta over Tampa. But I might bet on Tampa to win that division just because of remaining schedule.
And they just have to finish 1 game ahead of Atlanta.
Right.
So if they're tied, it's going to go to Atlanta. And if not, then
who do you like in the West? I'm leaning towards Seattle. I think they're playing the best.
They're playing the best. They've shown the least. They're most complete. They've proven to be the most complete so far this season. I don't know if when week 18 comes around, if they will be the best team, but they've got a 1-game lead and they're 2-2 in the division. The Rams and Cards are both 2-1. There's a lot to play out within the division here for those tiebreakers. I mean, we could have 3 teams that end up 9-8. All are 3-3 in the division, and we're going to like whatever the next tiebreakers is, which is like, I don't know if it goes to conference for the division. I know it goes to conference for the wild card, but does it go to conference next, or does it go to like opponents next? I can't remember what
I'm not positive on that.
What the division second tiebreaker is after. Let me see if I can find it right here. Actually,
while you're looking, I think we probably should have led with this actually, because Arizona hosts Seattle this week. So the winner of that game really has a leg up in the West. And I actually think Arizona has a much better remaining schedule than Seattle too. I mean, they host the Pats in week 15, go to Carolina, at the Rams, host the Niners that probably are shot by that point, where Seattle, after going to Arizona, they have to host Green Bay and Minnesota, and then they end with at Chicago, at the Rams. So even if Seattle's playing better, if they lose this week, I think Arizona's going to the playoffs.
And Arizona would solidify a at least 500 division record if they win that game too. And
which is big.
Yeah, it's going to be huge because I don't know how many, and they could potentially, win another West game and be above 500, which would pretty much be it. Like if the Cardinals can just win those NFC West division games, win one more game.
Yeah.
Playoffs.
They beat Seattle this week. They're in really good shape.
Yeah. So that's a huge one. You're right. That's a good call. And so we'll break down that game and make our picks for that one on Friday. Let's talk Packers. Let's talk wide receivers. Let's talk Packers Lions week 14 Thursday nighter next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. And anytime we reference lines like the 3.5 that the Lions are favored here in week 14, those lines and odds all come from FanDuel. You want to go bet on MVP, you want to go bet on Josh Allen, you want to go bet on one of the underdogs to go win the MVP, because that race is tight enough to where it is definitely not done. You can get in on all of that action and get a big return right now at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. So MVP, offensive defensive player of the year, rookies of the year, all the weekly lines, of course, draft props as well. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets during the NFL season as well. NBA, NHL too. Find it all there. Just visit FanDuel.com or download the app. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So the Green Bay Packers are an interesting football team, and we'll tie this into the game, and we'll make our picks to end the show here. But wide receiver salaries have kind of gotten out of control and have spiraled upward over the last couple of off seasons, to the point where after quarterbacks, it's like defensive linemen and wide receivers are right there. Wide receivers have leapfrogged corners and leapfrog even offensive tackles for how much they're getting paid and how many guys are getting these big money deals at the wide receiver position in the NFL. And there was a chart that came across my timeline a couple days ago, and I thought it was fascinating. And it showed, and it was from Jason at Jason _OTC over the cap. Jason Fitzgerald does a phenomenal job at overthecap.com. And this chart shows wide receiver yards per game versus wide receiver room annual salary for teams. And it's pretty fascinating. I'll put it up on the screen here in a second. The Green Bay Packers have the least expensive wide receiver room in the NFL, yet they've got a top, 5 or 6 group. They're not number one as far as yards per game go. And, maybe yards per game isn't the most, because there's counting stats there and there's bad teams that chuck it a lot. And you've got teams like the Falcons and the Rams and the Seahawks and even the Cowboys have more yards per game than the Green Bay Packers right now. Of course, the Bengals are up there as well, and the Ravens. But you just look at total wide receiver production, how many yards these wide receivers are getting versus how much teams are spending on wide receivers. And the Green Bay Packers are spending by far the least, but they're getting great production from their wide receivers. And you look at every single draft, Matt, and you see all these teams or all these players that are coming into the league. I mean, it is just a wide open faucet of talent coming from college to the NFL at that position. It's one of the most plentiful positions that the NFL is getting from the college game. So the scarcity thing doesn't add up to me with how much wide receivers are getting right now in the NFL. And if you look at the other side of the graph with the wide receiver rooms that are the most expensive, you have the 49ers, who are league average in yards per game right now. The Dolphins are well below average. Even the Eagles are below average. The Bears, a lot of the teams with the most money spent aren't any better than a lot of teams that have the least amount of money spent at the wide receiver position. And so all that is to say, Matt, are wide receivers being overpaid right now? We jump the shark as far as wide receiver spending in the NFL.
Perhaps. And anyone that plays fantasy football will realize this is a very, very down year for the top receivers across the board. If you look at projected yardage totals of the top guys, I mean, it's set up to be one of the leanest 1,000-yard receiver years that you can imagine. And something that just, think about the guys that were drafted high in fantasy that aren't putting up, huge numbers at the moment. There's a lot of them, Tyreek Hill, et cetera, et cetera. Some of these guys look like they've gotten old all of a sudden too. Side note, and you've said this a bunch, and it's very much a Kittle thing. I'd gladly spend top of the market on the best tight end in the league. I mean, that's the value to me. That's stealing right now. That's shopping in the right aisles. And in terms of positions I would value, quarterback, of course, is one. I'll give defensive linemen anything they want if they're those defensive player of the year type guys we talked about or high impact guys, then tackle for me. And I'm not sure receiver would even be next. I'm not sure what position would be next. And I'm glad you brought up the Packers because I've had a theory. I probably stole it from someone else. I'm sure I'm not the only one that had it. Is if I was a GM of Team X and I drafted a day 2 wide receiver every year or 4 out of 5 years or 3 out of 4 years, I mean, regularly, I drafted a day 2 receiver, I bet I'd have a very comparable room to Green Bay. You might miss on a Polk in New England here and there, but you end up with a McConkey the next year. You know what I mean? And the thought is when they get to be in year 4, like A.J. Brown with Tennessee, I could probably trade him for a first-round pick. Like you get a lot in return and just keep replenishing, and over and over and over,
Yeah, I would put him behind offensive tackles for sure. Not interior offensive linemen, maybe, but just the scarcity. You look at the trade deadline. Who was available at the trade deadline? There's
always receivers. Yeah,
there's no offensive tackle that is the Amari Cooper level of offensive tackles that's available at the trade deadline. Right.
No,
but you can go get an Amari Cooper if you need that.
Devontae Adams.
Right. In the draft, it's like, man, once you get to the second round, well, we don't like any of these guys. They can't play tackle. His arms are too short. He's not that athletic enough. You can find Pro Bowl wide receivers throughout the draft and that's the thing. So looking at the graph, the Green Bay Packers all the way at the left, they don't even have first round salary wide receivers. They got a second rounder, a third rounder, a fifth rounder, a fourth rounder. That's their wide receiver group. It's a really good wide receiver group. And it makes it easier, obviously, once you've got a good quarterback and you can do like the Chiefs did and trade that wide receiver, right? If you got to, and the Packers do have a pretty good quarterback and a good offensive mind drawing all this stuff up too. So this is just to say that I think the league's gotten a little weird at wide receiver, and I don't know what the answer is, because you still need three guys on the field most of the time at wide receiver, so you need them, but as long as you can draft and develop and have a quarterback, you're ahead of the game, because you don't need to go mess around and pay $30 million a year to a wide receiver.
Yeah. And I think the answer to, when we get to draft stuff, all these players are great, but I want Sewell over Jamar Chase. I want Alt over Neighbors. You know what I mean? And it has nothing to do with Chase or Neighbors being crappy. They're awesome. It's just, I can't find tackles. There's not as many of them walking the planet.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Packers Lions, who you got here? The line was started at 3. I think it's climbed to 3.5 now, and which I don't like, because I was jumping at the bit to say, give me the Lions and I'll give up those 3 points at home against the Green Bay Packers. Where are you at on this one? Lions, Packers, Thursday night, the home Lions at FanDuel, favored by 3.5 points.
First off, I've been critical of the NFL for some of their scheduling this year, but I love that both these teams have a full week after playing on Thanksgiving. Well done. Good stuff. Yeah. And now they get an even 10-day rest until next week. Great. That's how you do it. Good stuff. I think the Lions are clearly a tier above. I mean, we always talk power rankings every Tuesday on my Steelers show, and kind of came to the conclusion that there's 8 really good teams, give or take. But I think there's 3, the Lions, Eagles, Bills, that are clearly above the other 5. The Vikings, Packers, Steelers of the world, those type of teams. And standalone game, the Lions seem to just mash people in these type of games too by a lot. And I don't think they'll have any problem keeping their foot on the accelerator either. I think they win this one, not going away, but pretty much control the game.
I'm exactly with you. I love how the Lions are playing, and now the Lions have blown some teams out this year. They've also played those division opponents really close, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I bet if you picked the underdog in division games, no matter how big the line was, you'd be doing pretty well in a lot of cases. And we saw how close the Chicago Bears played the Lions, and we think the Lions are a lot better than the Bears, right? And so for that reason, I think the Packers can keep it close, and that half a point's really big for me. I think 3 is the perfect line. I'm still going to give up the 3.5, but man, I hate it. I would wait for that 3 instead of the 3.5. That's how close I think that is. And I think it's really good, and totally a popcorn game for me. I can't wait to watch how this game goes down. The Packers are coached tremendously. They're playing really good football right now, but the Lions, I think, are just a juggernaut. The way they're able to win in the trenches, win up front with their offensive line, create, thunder and lightning. What are they called? I forget what they call them.
Knuckles and Sonic, I think. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, Sonic. That's what it is. Which is phenomenal, I think, for Jameer Gibbs. Sonic. That's exact. My son is 6 years old. And every time he runs, he's like, I'm Sonic, and he tries to run. That's fantastic. I love it. And that's exactly how Jameer Gibbs plays. And with the way that Jared Goff's playing, and we probably didn't give him enough credit when we're talking about the MVP stuff. We kind of just said his name and that's it. But Jared Goff has been playing phenomenal for this team. But on the other side, I mean, Josh Jacobs has maybe even entered the conversation with how well he's played recently for the Packers as far as offensive player of the year. He's probably maybe even third, right behind the other running backs in Derrick Henry and in Saquon Barkley. So this is a good one. Jordan Love has not been turning the ball over as much recently, too. So both these teams playing at a high level at this time as well. So I can't wait for this. This is awesome. Great way to start the week. It's not a short week, so you get to really see these teams have a week to prepare for this game in week 14. Packers, Lions, NFC North, an old school battle. Oh, I love it. I can't wait. Give me the Lions, but I wouldn't be shocked at all at a Packers upset here.
No, it's going to be a really good game.
That is game number 1. No 6-pack this week of picks. I'll give you the sounder here. Even though we did a 1-pack. We'll come back Friday. We'll make the rest of our picks for week 14. Tomorrow's mailbag episode. We've got a whole lot to talk about there, including the in-season AFC North Hard Knocks too, which I can't wait to hear what you say about that. So all of that coming up tomorrow right here, Peacock and Williamson.